Hello and welcome to this week's edition of High School Sports Saturday here on Sports Radio 105.5 WEEI. I am Jim Pignatiello, and this week I am joined in studio by Tom King and Jack Flagler. We are all from MassLive.com. We're high school sports reporters, and we're going to talk some high school sports today, hence the name. Guys, thanks for being in today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Jim.
Absolutely.
In just a little bit, we'll be joined in studio by Minnechaug girls soccer coach Nundi Goncalves. He'll be in studio to talk about his two-time defending Western Mass champions. They got to the state finals. We'll talk all about that later on in the show. Should be a lot of fun. He's an interesting character and one I'm expecting to be a great guest, so we're looking forward to that. But first, let's talk about football state semifinals that are set for later today. We've got a pair of doubleheaders, Tom, one in Leominster and one at Westfield State. Let's start with the Westfield State games. The day kicks off at 11 a.m. It's Turner's Falls versus Littleton in Division 6. And Littleton comes into this undefeated. And at this point in the season, if you're an undefeated team, it means something. It's not like a 5-0 team a while back.
Yeah, they're a very, very strong team. It's going to be Turner's Falls is going to have to pull off another upset. They're the 4 seed coming in. They knocked off the top seeded McCann Tech, and then they knocked off the number 2 seeded Mohawk to win the Western Mass Championship. So they're going to have to do it again. These are two offenses that are very similar. You've seen Turner's Falls. You know. They can score in a hurry. Littleton's the same way. They kind of run. They have a dual threat quarterback who's rushed for over 1,000 yards, passed for over 1,000 yards. They got a great running back, Travis Bissett, who's rushed for almost 1,000 yards. So very similar offenses. I think it's going to come down to who can outscore the other team. Really,
we are seeing a lot more of that kind of each year. It feels like with the dual threat quarterbacks, you have more offenses kind of geared towards that, putting their best athletes there, and maybe they're not even the best thrower on the team, but they can do enough in that way to make the defenses have to be aware of it. And you see guys like we'll get to him, but like Ethan Wells at Wacona. We see guys like. Cody Williams isn't really in that category, but we have started to see that. I know South Hadley has had guys like that in the last few years, and it is a challenge at this level. If you can do both, I mean, it's usually a good sign for your team.
Yeah, it's really hard to defend, and we've seen it at all levels: the NFL, college. I mean, it's trickling down into high school too. When you can put your best athlete at the quarterback position, a guy who, you have to respect their throw, but they can also run. It's really tough. It's tough to defend for defenses.
And as you said, I mean, Turner's Falls is not exactly a stranger to being quote-unquote the underdog, although this is a team, we talked about this last week, Tom, that got healthy. They got their running back healthy, Trent Bourbeau, and they have been kind of the underdog by ranking, and they presumably go into this the same way, this game, but that's not a situation that's going to bother them at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think Littleton would be taking them lightly just because they were the 4 seed. They know they're a strong opponent. We've mentioned it before. Their only 2 losses were to Division 5 teams, so the seed doesn't really tell the whole story there. And
it is interesting though. Turner's Falls is as a Franklin County team, and even as a team that's like into Franklin County, it's not even like right off in Greenfield or anything. I mean, this is a road trip for them down to Westfield as well. It's not like a huge home field advantage. It'll be interesting to see how what turns out what their turnout is fan-wise and things for both schools, because it's not like it's Westfield playing down the road or even the Springfield school. It's a team that's making a trip itself.
Right, yeah, and I know some teams. I think Wacona is going to be busing in some students to hopefully have some strong fan. I don't know about Turner's Falls, whether they'll be doing that, but hopefully it's a good crowd because it always adds to the atmosphere.
The second game, Westfield State, is the Division II game. Springfield Central against St. John Shrewsbury. If this isn't a shootout, I mean, take the over, right? If this isn't a shootout based on recent performance, I mean, what do we know?
Yeah, I mean, both teams are really high-powered offenses. St. John's has put up 50 in their last 3 games. They beat Leominster 51-42 for the Central Mass title. That was a revenge game from a season-opening loss to Leominster, who was the number 1 seed. And so it's got 2 games at Westfield State that should be high-scoring games.
And it is a little bit, they kind of do come in differently. You mentioned this. All season long, we assumed Central would be here. St. John's, I'm sure, had the expectation to be there, but I think a lot of people in the area probably were thinking that it would be a Leominster game against Central. So interesting that they're kind of coming a little bit from different points of view.
Yeah, I mean, Central's been obviously the juggernaut in Western Mass all season, whereas Leominster, like you mentioned, was kind of the team to beat in Central Mass, and I think it was a bit of an upset for St. John's to win there.
And we'll really have a good sense of the Central defense. It's got to be the best offense they've played all year. And, they have had some issues in the special teams. You hope that sort of thing won't come back to haunt them. I mean, we were talking last week that the extra points have been so few and far between that it's almost worthwhile of just going for a 2-point conversion and hoping that you get half of them and still end up the same as if you kick an extra point every
their
time.
special teams that's the only concern I would have from a Central point of view. That I feel like that's the fact that they can't consistently hit those extra points, and they've had some issues with punts at times, and in a game where there's going to be a lot of touchdowns, those extra points are going to be huge because it could be 5 or 6 touchdowns for each team, and if they don't get those, it's going to be tough to recover from. And
we talked a little bit about this last week, but that was a game for Central last week that could have gone in a different direction. We said you can't let a team like that you can't give them extra chances, you can't bail them out, but you hope that there are some things that have been fixed, some things that they could start a little bit faster if you're rooting for Central on Saturday. That they can get off to a faster start and kind of build from there instead of having to kind of rebound from a tough start.
Yeah, it'll be a little bit. It's obviously going to be a different type of game though. Against Westfield, they knew they were only going to get so many possessions.
Sure.
St. John's plays fast too, and Central plays fast, so a 1 or 2 touchdown deficit won't mean as much as it would maybe against a Westfield team that likes to ground and pound.
And it'll be interesting to see again. I guess I'm probably going to talk about the crowd in all 4 of these games, but it'll be interesting to see St. John's generally travels pretty well and has a pretty intense fan base. We'll see. The Central game was pretty well populated, but not necessarily what we would have thought for Western Mass Championship game. Will they travel to Westfield? Will St. John's have 8 buses down there? Maybe they'll have the Athol Girls Soccer RV pulled in. Who knows? I still want one of those. But so that'll be an interesting kind of thing to keep an eye on. And then, the other games, as we said, Doylefield and Leominster, also at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. The first game is Division 5. Hoosick Valley in that outstanding Hurricanes defense against a Northbridge team that is a pretty powerful juggernaut from Central Mass over the years. It'll be interesting to see if that defense, which was so impressive against East Hampton, can carry this into a team that maybe they haven't scouted at all. Maybe they have to kind of adjust on the fly, that sort of thing.
That's always the interesting part about these games. It's teams you haven't seen all year, teams you really haven't prepared for. I mean, we were at the Central game, and we were talking to a few of the players after the game, and they hadn't seen any film on either St. John's or Leominster. And I think a lot of these teams are the same way. They'll get into the film room for a few days, but it's not the same as opponents you're used to.
And, I mean, you've seen Hoosick. You've talked about how impressive their defense is. That is, I mean, if you're a good defense, though, it does kind of give you a little time to either figure things out or let the offense kind of adjust to what the other team's defense is doing. Having a good defense in a game like this is a good starting point, no matter what the matchup is.
Certainly, I mean, Hoosick's defense, I mean, they've leaned on them all year. Probably the best defense I've seen in that division. But it's going to be an interesting matchup because they're going up against an offense they haven't really played against, that dual threat quarterback, as we've talked about already. Kobe Schofer throwing for 1,200 yards, rush for over 1,000 yards. He's really the engine of that offense for Northbridge, and it's an offense in the Berkshire. They're triple option. They run a lot, but not with the quarterback, the athletic quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see how they match up with him.
Right, and that's why the last matchup for them was so interesting and maybe played right into their hands because East Hampton, if any team in Western Mass is like a Berkshire style of team, it really is East Hampton. Mm-hmm. And so this is a very different challenge for them, like you said.
Right.
They're not going to see that ground and pound, wishbone. This is a totally different matchup.
And they have to be prepared for the pass game in Northbridge because if they stack the line of scrimmage too hard, Schofer has shown that he can throw the ball down the field and make plays.
The team most like Northbridge in Berkshire County is, and that Hoosick has seen, is probably the other team, the last team of the 4 playing from Western Mass, and that's Wacona, that does have the dual threat at quarterback in Ethan Wells. They got Doherty, which is a Worcester team. That's at 2 o'clock. Also at Doylefield and Leominster. The back-to-back Berkshires. It's funny how that worked out. I mean, it wasn't the plan, but it's nice that kind of worked out that way. And the thing, I'm going to talk crowds again. I don't care. I'm talking crowds. Those are 2 pretty big rivalries in all sports. Wacona and Hoosick are decent rivalries for Berkshire County, even really good rivals. It'll be interesting to see, do they team up and root for each other? Does that happen? Because it's not just Western Mass against Central Mass. I mean, Berkshire's is its own thing. They'll tell you that. So is there such a kind of appreciation for what we do there, that you might see kind of a groundswell of the 2 fan bases kind of joining in and that sort of thing. I'm really interested to see that.
Another wrinkle to it is that they'll be playing each other in the Berkshire County Championship. So
right
on the day before Thanksgiving. Right. So, if they're both still in the state tournament, how will that game be played? Will they play all their starters? Will they play them the whole game? Whereas if they're both knocked out, that's going to have a different type of game.
Well, and Wacona coach Gary Campbell Jr. is one of the people that really pushed for that too, and it's interesting that he might be the team that, as an undefeated team, probably has the best chance to have to deal with that issue too. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting storyline going forward here to follow. So, those 4 games, this is where we really start to see there were kind of 2 things I think that we had to see about this tournament. The first was the non-qualifying teams and how that all played out, and it played out pretty well. We've talked about it. This is the next point, right? This is the point where there needs to be this high level of anticipation leading in. There needs to be a high excitement going out. I obviously want to see a lot of fans in the games, that sort of thing. This is where it should be kind of, the volume should be turned up to 11 here, right?
Sure. I certainly think the anticipation is there. These matchups, these games seem like they should be great games, and I expect them to be. We got some matchups, like we said, we got some high-powered offenses going on. We got some high-powered offenses. We got similar teams with Central and Shrewsbury, too. Up-tempo guys, Drew Smiley and Cody Williams that can sling it around the field. It should be a fun weekend.
And, the teams will play here, and winners have 2 weeks to kind of prepare. If they're playing on Thanksgiving, that's in the middle. We know that Central obviously isn't playing Thanksgiving anymore because of the state tournament situation. But this whole thing is very interesting because they have 2 weeks to prepare for a Super Bowl. If you have a Thanksgiving Day game like a Berkshire team, you have to deal with that. But at the same time, do you want to have the week in between like Central does? Do you wish you could play and have a tune-up? That doesn't really mean anything. The whole it's going to be very interesting to see how these things play out down the road.
It's always the question is whether you want to be rested or whether that'll make you rusty. And I think we see that in the college championships where these Alabama they're resting for a month and a half before the national title game, and sometimes they come out and the first quarter isn't quite what we've seen. So we'll see how that layoff affects some of these teams.
So lots of excitement later on today. And, of course, stick with MassLive.com. We're going to have live coverage of all 4 games. We'll have reporters at each one. We'll have a chat going on the website. We'll have Twitter. We'll be rolling at MassLiveHS and on all of our personal Twitter accounts. So you'll want to make sure to follow that along. But we are going to take a break now. When we come back, we will be having our Spotlight segment. We'll be joined by Minnechaug girls soccer coach Nundi Goncalves on High School Sports Saturday on Sports Radio 105.5 WEEI. Welcome back to High School Sports Saturday here on 105.5 Sports Radio WEEI. We are joined now by a host of people from the Minnechaug girls soccer team, Coach Nundi Goncalves, and players Sarah Johnston and Rene Hamel. Guys, thank you all very much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And of course, Jack Flagler is also here. He covers girls soccer for us, and he's going to have the tough, real pointy questions for you guys. So,
absolutely.
Well, I'll butter you up with the nice ones, and then Jack will jump in. But so the first question for me is to have to kind of defend the championship the way you guys did against what we, at least going to the tournament, felt like was a really deep Division I field. Did you feel like you had the bullseye on your back the whole year? How did the season feel going in and then kind of playing out the way it did? And let's say Rene. Rene Hamel on the mic.
I don't feel like we had a target on our back. I feel like a lot of people thought Belchertown was going to win it all, so we felt like we had to kind of live up to it. So we knew we had to go out and prove everyone wrong this year.
Sarah, was the Belchertown thing, did that take some of the pressure off that maybe would have been there otherwise with everything you guys had returning and being the defending champs?
I think it put more pressure on us, if anything, just because we knew that if we wanted to defend the title that we were going to have to come out even stronger than we did last year.
And was that kind of a motivating factor for you guys with how hard you worked in the preseason and all through the season to get better and get better?
Definitely. It was always a thought that since Belchertown was coming into our division that we were going to have to work harder than ever, so I think it was definitely motivation.
Nundi, how do you prepare for that deep of a tournament? You know that Pittsfield is back again, and obviously Belchertown had a great regular season. Did you talk about kind of having to be more ready because of that, or was there any difference, or are you just kind of entering the tournament the same way each year?
I think that we just prepared for the first game. It doesn't matter who it was. We have to win one. We didn't really think about Belchertown or Pittsfield, or what we all worried about was our first game, and that's what we prepared for.
Sure.
One day at a time.
Now, you guys, you had Pittsfield at the end. We talked about Belchertown, but it ended up being Pittsfield who was left standing in that upset win, and then, they faced you in the Western Mass Finals. Did you think you had, sort of more of an idea of what this Pittsfield team was than maybe some other teams in the tournament because you had faced them last year? A number 5 seed coming out of Berkshire County. Maybe they can sneak by some people, but, with that game last year and knowing what a tough opponent they are, do you feel like that helped you, going into the rematch, Rene?
Not really, because a lot of people graduated, so I think we just kind of looked at them like they were just another team. Just one game at a time, like Nundi said, so.
I'll ask this one to Nundi so that we don't get either of the ladies potentially in trouble. But there's this kind of attitude that, like, Berkshire teams, both on both sides, the boys and the girls, may play a different style or a different kind of team. Do you find that, or is that just kind of an easy kind of generalization that people make, and the media and among some coaches and things, Nundi?
I think that the perception is that the teams from the Berkshire County aren't that strong, but if you look back at Pittsfield's schedule, they played quite a few teams in Division I, and they gave them, they beat Belchertown in the playoffs. They played Westfield, they played West Springfield, so they don't surprise me. And like I said, everyone comes to play. It's a playoff, so it doesn't really matter who you play. You just have to be ready for everyone. And Pittsfield's a tough team, very tough team.
What did you guys think you did, really well throughout the year? Nundi, you've been doing this for a long time, a number of years, we'll say, a number of years.
Too many years.
And you've had teams who have made deep runs, and I'm sure each of them stand out for some different reason to you. But for this group, who had such a good tournament, what was it that you think it'll remember when you look back on them?
That's every team is different. That's for sure. Every year is different because like Sarah said, that everyone graduates people every year. I think that what I remember from this team is how tight they were. They were really tight, like a family. They really stuck up for each other. They had a lot of fun. They enjoyed hanging around with each other. And when you get to those 0-0, 1-0 games, I think that puts you over the edge. When you're ready to battle for your teammate and your friend, that's huge. So I think together they played really well together, and that's why we won.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit off the air, guys. How you've moved on to playing with club teams now. You play a lot of soccer throughout the year. Obviously, for a lot of athletes, it's not just high school soccer. It's a year-round thing. But your coach was just mentioning how tight you were. Sarah was playing for Minnechaug and putting on that jersey means something more than maybe playing club throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there will never be any team that compares to Minnechaug. As much as I love my club team, I don't think there will ever be a replacement.
Is that because you grow up with these girls? You spend a lot of time with girls. Why is that the high school team is sometimes tighter than the club teams?
It's just because you're spending every single day together for 3 months, and then just to have it end so suddenly, it's hard to get over it.
Definitely, but it's something that everybody goes through together. Even though it was obviously
on and off
only
the field.
Unhappy for one team. Right?
Yeah. Yes.
There's such a great history for the program. Do you guys kind of consider that? Does it add pressure for you guys? Is it something that you guys are proud of to be a part of? How does that, Rachel, kind of play into the team mindset and kind of just in general? Is it something that you kind of worry about being your own specific team, or is it something where you have a lot of pride in kind of continuing that history and adding to it?
I think we all have a lot of pride in continuing the history. Definitely being part of being in the playoffs every year in the finals is a big thing to be a part of.
Sarah, jump in.
I think that just the fact that we've gone to the finals, I mean, not just me, before I was even at Minnechaug, that they've gone to the finals so many years that it just makes us want to go to the finals every single year. So I think that even coming in as a freshman, I wanted to go to the playoffs before I even knew what I was getting myself into. Yeah.
Nundi, how do you keep the program successful year in and year out? You do see programs like this, right? I mean, obviously Ludlow boys and Belchertown boys and some of the girls teams as well, Belchertown girls, and especially in the last number of years. What does it take to kind of not have a specifically down year for the program?
Well, first of all, you have to have good soccer players
and a great coach. Well, I'll say that for you.
Thanks, but
Well, coaching.
Coach, I mean, the kids, like I said the other night at our banquet, was that they have a lot of good coaching in the youth level. And so every year we have good players. Now, their first day of tryouts, I have to teach how to, basic skills. They already have they're already quite advanced. So my job really is to get them together as a group, as a team, play as a team, and, fight for each other and that kind of stuff. So I guess I should be thanking is the people that coach in the youth and the club teams, like you were saying, because that's what helps us out a lot. So the pressure's not on. It's just every year's new. And winning beats everything. Winning is great.
I remember we talked about that, I think, after one of your wins, Nundi. I can't remember which game it was, but you said ask Joe Torre that question. It's great players who make the great coaches, and it's talent. But it sounds like, there's got to be something else there that, whether it's, part of the culture in Wilbraham or just, great youth coaching that, these kids are ready to go as freshmen when they come to you at the varsity level.
Yeah, I honestly, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Okay, so like my wife says, you help a little. Okay. It's a combination, maybe a little Nundi, a little of, the under 10 coach, the under 12 coach, the parents that spend a lot of time in the backyard kicking back and forth with their kids. So by the time, like I said, they get to me, they're well advanced. So it makes it a lot easier. And I just go along for the ride. It's great.
Well, I'm going to ask both of you guys this question, but we'll start with Sarah. Now, do you guys focus mostly on soccer? Do you have other sports that you play?
Just soccer.
Just soccer. Renee, the same thing, or do you play other sports?
Soccer all year round.
Was that always the case, or at what point did it become the deal?
I mean, I did gymnastics for 5 years, but then it came to the point where I had to pick between that and soccer, and I had no problem picking soccer. So.
And that is probably part of the key, right? You do see more specialization. You guys are I'm old. We talk about this in the MassLive office now all the time, Nundi. I'm so much older than all the guys that work for me. But we're not talking. But you do see that more, right? Where the kids are a little more specialized, and it does help your program and a program in specific if you do have a number of kids that are interested in that specific sport.
Oh, definitely helps the individual player, but yeah, it's huge because if you look at the teams that really excel in Western Mass, whether boys or girls, if you look at their roster, I'll bet you that majority of their players do play, all year round. They play indoor, they play club soccer, they play high school, and they play, all the time. It's the three sports start like when I was a kid, way back then. Those days are over, long gone. I mean, kids are specializing now when they're 11 and 12. Parents are paying for their kid to go to camps every week. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I think that it's good for an athlete to play more than one sport. I really do.
Did he tell you guys this before? You guys won 2 straight Western Mass titles, or are you saying it now that you're gone?
Just now.
Yeah, it's easy to say that when you have the championship trophies.
Yes, it is. But I mean, it's great for me, I guess.
Well, Sarah, when you chose soccer over gymnastics, were you kind of like sad that you had to give up another sport, or were you just like, I get to play soccer all year round, it's awesome?
I mean, maybe for a day I was like a little sad, but then I was like, I would much rather be playing soccer all year.
Yeah. Renee, do you feel the same way? That did you ever have anything else that you were interested in, or
I mean, I played basketball us in the winter sort of, but soccer's always been my main sport for me, so.
Yeah, so it wasn't like you felt like you were giving up anything else. It was just you get to play the sport you want to all year.
Yeah.
Well, we've avoided the state championship game so far. We really want to get into it after the break. We're going to have you guys back in for another segment, but we do have to pay some bills first. We'll be right back on High School Sports Saturday here on 105.5 Sports Radio WEEI with Sarah Johnston, Rene Hamel, Nundi Goncalves, and the crew. All right, welcome back to High School Sports Saturday here on Sports Radio 105.5 WEEI. Jim Pignatiello and Jack Flagler right now from MassLive, and we are talking to some of the players and the coach of the Minnechaug girls soccer team. I keep almost saying basketball because we're moving on in MassLive to the winter preview, Nundi, and I'm doing my best to not say basketball. But so we're joined by Sarah Johnston, Rene Hamel, and Nundi Goncalves. I did it again. I hit it. I've pronounced your name right every time so far, Nundi. I'm very proud of myself. So as I mentioned before the break, we got to talk about the state final. Back in the day, they used to not go to PKs. They used to play 110 minutes, and if it was still tied, you'd be co-champions. I think it's an interesting question to ask the people who were on the wrong side of PKs what they would have thought if that was still the deal. We'll start with Rene. We'll just go kind of straight across the table. Rene, we'll put the spotlight on you first.
I think it would have been good, obviously, because we're the only team that's really held them off this year. I think we deserved to be there. Obviously, because we were able to. They didn't score on us or anything, so I don't know. PKs were a tough way to lose. So
the debate between co-champs or having to go to PKs and having a chance to win, but then not having it work out.
I mean, co-champs, it's kind of like sharing the title, and as much as that's a nice thing, I think that's probably, in the end, not the way that both teams would probably want it. So, I mean, even though penalty kicks is a rough way to go out, I think it's better than co-champs.
Nundi, we'll get your opinion on this. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of preparing for PKs and that sort of thing as well. So what do you think?
Well, like Sarah says, I think at the end of the day, at the end of the game, you play 110 minutes, let's decide a winner. The rules going in. The rule is if you don't score or if it's tied after 110 minutes, whatever the overtimes, you go to PKs. That's the way the rules are. I mean, in hockey, they play sometimes 4 or 5 periods. We can't be there forever. So the rule is PKs. We've won some on PKs. I've lost some on PKs. So it's the rules, as Belichick would say. It is what it is. Let's move on.
No, obviously, when you lose on PKs, it's awful. You feel like you kind of got cheated a little bit just because it's, the way that you go out. But when you win on PKs, does it just feel like winning any other game? Or does it feel like a little bit less because, you go to what?
Me personally, I never thought about it. Win is a win. They give you the trophy, you jump up and down, the game's over, you win. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with winning PKs. I really don't have a problem losing PKs. It's a bummer. It's a tough way to decide a game, but that's the rule. Like I said earlier, it's the rule, and we play by the rules. That's the way it is.
I think last year when we won in PKs in Western Mass, it was so exhilarating. I didn't even know what to do with myself compared to when winning in regulation this year. It was exciting, but it definitely didn't have that final thrill of being able to run over to each other immediately as it happened.
Yeah, you don't get a lot of walk-off goals in soccer. It's not
Right.
like getting a buzzer beater in basketball or a home run.
Yeah.
So that's the closest thing to it, right? Is either a save or a goal to win it in PKs or anything or something like that. So how much did you guys work on, over the course of the season, over the course of once you're in the tournament, on PKs, on kind of, do you know the order if it comes up? How do you kind of prepare for this in case it happens, especially, and it ends up happening, of course, in the state championship?
Well, pretty much when preseason or when postseason starts, at practices, Nundi will just have us at the end of practice or at some point during practice just go over to the net, put Anna in the goal, and then we'll do 3 rounds of penalty kicks, and him and Matt, our assistant coach, will talk it out, and then when game time comes and when you got to do penalty kicks, they have a good idea.
So the order. You kind of.
We don't know the order.
So
Nundi knows the order.
Right. So you
know the order.
You have the experience of going up to the line and seeing Anna in net, but you can't simulate the pressure. Nundi, how do you deal with that as a coach?
You don't know. You really don't know what's going to happen. You try. We sit there and the girls, as one's taking the kick, they're yelling and screaming, but it's not the same. You can't. We yell. We have fun with it. But it's just hard to. You can't simulate that. There's no way. It's impossible because at example Friday night against Newton North, you've got I don't know how many people there. I'm not going to say 50,000, but probably a few thousand there. Whatever, people are screaming and everybody's rooting on. The pressure is enormous. I was even taking a kick and my heart was pounding. And I felt lightheaded. So yeah, you just can't. And you go up there and you hit the ball and you hope it. You execute. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like I told them after the game, I've seen professionals miss. It happens. Professionals miss free throws. I mean, it is what it is. It's a gimme, but that pressure you can't simulate. It's impossible. That's all there is to it. Go there and do your best.
So if you go in not necessarily knowing your order, what makes you? How do you decide it? How do you determine who's the 5 and then who's going to be the 6? You guys went to 6.
Correct.
So how do you kind of determine that? Obviously without hurting anybody's feelings, of course.
Well, at first, we had an idea. What we wanted. In practice, we try to. That's why, like Sarah said, we did it for a few weeks. From preseason. Well, as soon as the seeds came out. We do it every day, and we just make mental notes of who was consistent. Who was, and we keep an eye on, who puts it in the right spot every time consistently. So we have an idea. We just don't have the order. Last year, I believe Rene went 4th or 5th. This year, This year we needed a sure goal because it was really close. So I put Rene. I think she went 3rd this year because we wanted somebody that I felt confident can bury it, so it'll get us on the plus side. And that's how we decided it. We had no idea who the 6th shooter was going to be until it actually happened. We had an idea, and then Matt Mosher, my assistant coach, and I, we discussed it, we talked about it, and we came to the conclusion that that's who we're going to have shoot.
Yeah, so you guys are coming up to the line, standing with your teammates, and you don't even know when you're going up there. You just sort of be ready when your name gets called, and that's all you can do?
I have told Nundi since day one that I will never take a penalty kick.
Well, and a lot of players feel that way.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, when you're at practice, you probably don't miss. But like I said, when there's people at that moment, some players don't want the responsibility to take the kick. Rene takes it gladly. Give me the ball.
Thank you.
Give me the ball. And that's why we put her when I needed a goal. That's why we moved her up because I don't want to say a sure thing, but pretty close to the sure thing. So, some people, you have to have that confidence, the arrogance, like Michael Jordan, give me the ball, I want the last shot. And that's what Rene did, and that's what PK people do. They want the ball. Some kids don't want the ball. They don't want the responsibility. So it's a fine line to figure out who's going to take and who's not. It really is.
So at what point do you get over it? I mean, you knew that it was going to be the end of the season, right? So there isn't that kind of finality of no more practice because you knew that would be it. But have you yet? Or does it take a while to kind of, get over the disappointment, or is it something that'll bother you for a while? Do you think? Gotta ask.
I think I'm just more disappointed with the season being over now. That can't be with my teammates every day. But I definitely wasn't disappointed that we lost because made it that far. Won Western Mass back-to-back, but honestly, more disappointed that the season's over and I won't get to wear the jersey again.
Yeah, I agree, and just the fact that I think after our banquet Sunday, it kind of settled in that it was really over, which was hard to imagine. I don't think it's fully hit me yet because I think next year, when I start to see all the tweets from the girls on the team saying, "Oh, can't wait for tryouts," it will hurt.
And it is an interesting position to be a high school coach, right, Nundi? Or I guess college coaches deal with this too, where you're saying goodbye every single year to kids that you've had for a certain amount of time. Do you just kind of hope that they get a chance to go out kind of the way these girls did with an amazing season and literally a season where they'll be hanging banners for their accomplishments and that sort of thing?
Oh, gosh, that's probably for me. It's the hardest part. Is every year you lose. They're players, but they're all, after Rene and Sarah have been on varsity for 4 years, so it's they're like my friends. They're like my own kids, really, because I've known them for so long. I don't know. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Sometimes you want kids to graduate. Sometimes you don't. But that's reality. We deal in reality. This is the way it is. You want them to leave. You want them to go to a college, and so you get new ones coming every year. That's the way the system is. I have no problem with it.
Yeah, it sounds like for you guys, it was almost just as rewarding that you played through every practice and every game until you possibly could, and you got to spend, I guess, as much time with your team as you could, more so than the banners or the wins. Is that sort of how you looked at the year?
That was kind of our goal, just to take every game one at a time and keep being able to play.
I mean, what more can you ask for your senior year to play every single possible game that they give us? So I think that was awesome to go out that way.
I mean, you guys really milked it. You went an extra 30 minutes of overtime.
That's right,
and extra PKs. Even you couldn't have made that. You couldn't have made that season last any longer if you tried. So that's if that was the goal, that was an impressive feat. Thank you all very much for coming in today. We really do appreciate it. It was our pleasure to have you in. Nundi Goncalves, the Minnechaug girls soccer coach, and also senior Sarah Johnston and Rene Hamel. Thank you guys very much for coming in today.
Thank you.
We're going to take one more break before we come back to wrap things up. When we return, we'll have Tom King back in the fold, and we're going to put a bow on the non-football fall season when we come back on High School Sports Saturday here on Sports Radio 105.5 WEEI. All right, fourth and final segment here on High School Sports Saturday on Sports Radio 105.5 WEEI. Jim Pignatiello, Tom King, and Jack Flagler are all here from MassLive.com. We'll let you guess which one of us is which. Before we go, I really wanted to kind of talk about, now that the fall season, aside from football, is over, there have been a lot of interesting storylines that I wanted to kind of put a bow on and kind of get one last chance to talk about. The first thing being the Granby girls. We just talked girls soccer, so let's continue. Granby girls soccer team really kind of established themselves as a powerhouse. It's been building. They'd won a Western Mass title before, but this run to the state final and kind of the performance that they've had all year, really impressive. I mean, that's a team that was D3 and in realignment didn't go down, and they still made it to the state final. So, Jack, you as our girls soccer guy, I mean, you really kind of got a chance to really take a look at that this year.
Yeah, it was a really impressive team, and it sort of came together for them. And I think in the way that any coach would want it to, with veteran leadership, some great seniors on that team with Kylie Barron, Tara McAlchis, Brittany Haschchild in goal. Seniors who can really lead and have been in pressure situations before, and then young players will be coming back as well. Tara's sister, Erin McAlchis, some other really great players, Megan McGill, who will be sort of taking up that leadership role, so that you get that turnover that Minnechaug has had when the great players leave. You have battle-tested varsity players who are coming back. So it's definitely set up well for the future, Jim, and they have an excellent squad that had a really great year. I think Coach Nick Borman probably wouldn't say it was his favorite team or their best year, but when we're looking at it from a media perspective, got it to a level that program has never gotten to before. So every coach loves his team, but when we're looking at it as an outsider, it certainly brought that program, to new places and new heights. So excellent season for them. As we mentioned before when we were talking about Minnechaug, the season can only end in a happy way for one team in the entire state. But when they look back with some perspective, despite the loss to a really strong Newburyport team, certainly deserving of a state title. But I think when Granby looks back, they'll be really happy with the season they had.
And one team of many that we really had an influx of freshmen this year in girls soccer that made a real impact, and kids that are going to be exciting to follow over the next 3 years, as sophomores all the way through their senior year. I thought that was a really fun storyline to be following. Multiple teams had leading scorers that were freshmen, and it's always so much fun to get not just one of those, but when you see like a handful and you see a class that's like, what was in the water the year that they were born, But it's so exciting when you do get these young, I don't want to say prodigies, but these young exciting stars coming through.
Yeah, we mentioned Erin McAllister for Granby, a really young, exciting goal scorer. She's a freshman. There's a ton all across Western Mass. Sage Tachira for Amherst, a really, really strong player. There's just so many, not just freshmen, but I guess young players.
Sure.
That are going to be coming up and doing a great job. And Granby, you mentioned as a powerhouse D3 school not moving down, but they had their hands full with Hampshire Regional in a really excellent game. That was a 4 versus a 1 seed. We think of Granby as having such a nice year in retrospect, but they came in as a 4. They might argue they should have been a little higher, and maybe they're right, but that shows that there's a lot of other talented teams in this region, along with the Rams.
That was a great bracket. I mean, you think about the East Hampton defense, that Hampshire season that they had, the Berkshire teams that were in that bracket. That was a really fun bracket. Speaking of a team, we talked about the Granby girls kind of setting the bar higher. Belchertown boys soccer program wins its first state championship as a team that kind of had been knocking on the door for so long. I think they won like 6 Western Mass titles in the last 8 or 9 years. And Tom, you and I saw them both a couple times.
Yep.
You see some of the special players. I mean, you can't think enough of when you see Alex DeSantis, who's been on this program, and the way he plays.
He's such a strong player. I mean, his finishing abilities are. I haven't seen anybody in Western Mass who can finish like him. And I think for those seniors that had won 3 Western Mass titles, they really wanted that state championship. It was a goal all season, and when they won Western Mass, they were excited, but they knew that it was just a stepping stone to their real goal, which was the state title. So it's good to see them, come home with what they were searching for.
That's a great. Sorry, Jim, didn't mean to cut you off there. That's a great sort of juxtaposition with the other state championship, because I think Westside probably didn't see themselves as state champions going into this year. It was always part of the goal for Belchertown, and it seemed to be just beyond even Westside's wildest expectations.
Yeah, I mean, Westside, I don't think anybody knew how good they would really be until they lost a few games early in September, and then they went on a run. They didn't lose since. After September 26th, they lost to Belchertown, and they just got so hot. And
they got healthy and went, and both those teams got hot at the same time. B-Town's last loss was also to Westside, and then they rolled through after the last 2 months of the season. Churchill League foes, and that's not even supposedly the power conference in Western Mass.
Right.
That's
you don't get as many points for a win in the Churchill League as you do in the Smith, right?
Might have to rethink that a little bit. But again, another team, a team that kind of needed to get healthy early, and then got a couple of guys come back, and then Alex Craver
right when you got a guy like that in the playoffs, especially the games maybe slow down a little, and you got someone you can rely on in the back line and the net there.
And how about Division I boys? I mean, we've talked about the boys basketball programs and back-to-back state championships and kind of what they've had, but we've now had at least 4 teams make it to the Division I boys soccer championships. Ludlow had won 2 in a row. Amherst made it last year and played a phenomenal game in a 1-0 loss, and then Westside wins in PKs this year. I mean, really impressive, especially when it's not just one team owning it. When it's 3 separate teams over 4 years all making it, it says a lot about the level of play out here, especially at the highest level.
Yeah, it really does. And all you have to do is be at that game between Ludlow and Westside when they played, and it's obvious that the quality of play here is just at a really high level. That was a fantastic game that those 2 teams played, and then to have Westside go through and win the state title, I think it proves that once again. And just like you said, Alex Craver, just an incredible year. When you go to PKs, I know Nundi and the girls from Minnechaug were saying it. You never know what will happen, but you feel pretty confident when you have a keeper like that in a high pressure situation like PKs.
Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about volleyball, because we had 2 interesting storylines here. Tom, volleyball in both programs that won Western Mass has been kind of an expectation to win Western Mass for both Longmeadow and Frontier, but this year neither one of them felt like gimmies. And Frontier, we kind of still thought would win a Western Mass title, but for them to go on and win their 4th straight state title, having graduated a great senior class, including Cassidy Stankowski, who I'm sure they're really tired of having to talk about or read about. But, a 2-time Gatorade Player of the Year doesn't just, come out of Western Mass all the time, graduate her and still win another state championship. I mean, I don't even think even halfway through the season that Sean McDonald necessarily thought he had a state championship team. And what a growth spurt for these girls who played all year with him.
I mean, they were a strong team all season, but like you said, not the powerhouse that they have been in the past. I mean, they lost 2 games to Minnechaug, their first Western Mass loss since
forever,
2004 maybe or something. 9 years, however many years, 9 years I think it was. And then you look at Longmeadow, it was a completely different type of team. They didn't come in with those expectations. They were the 4 seed.
Minnechaug had rolled. We all kind of had almost passed the torch already, and then here comes Longmeadow, and they win their 7th straight title, I believe it was.
7th straight title, yeah. I mean, if there's
and they had to go through Minnechaug, which is the nice thing. They didn't have something weird happen to Minnechaug. They went through and they beat them in 5.
Yeah, and that's a team that they faced last year in the championship game, and it seemed like, like you said, Minnechaug had taken over maybe the crown as the top team in the region, but that was kind of a shocking upset. Which is weird to say. It's, for a team that's 6-time defending Western Mass champion, but it was.
Absolutely. I really don't think anybody kind of saw that coming, and then all of a sudden you start seeing updates on Twitter from Brandon Chase, who's covering it, and you're like, this is a match. Holy cow. Field hockey, we had Smith and Frontier, our arch rivals in Division II, next door to each other up in the Franklin County borderline. League rivals. It comes down to overtime and to the best player in Western Mass, Daniel Dusso, scoring an overtime goal for Smith Academy to win and end Frontier's 2-year reign in the division. I mean, it's it's happened a bunch of times. We said it, when you have the star players come through, it's so much fun with that. Kids that you followed for this long, kids who are going on to great programs, to have them kind of go out like that. It's just such an exciting thing.
And it was a fitting end, I think, for those 2 teams to be playing against each other. And like you said, for her to score that overtime goal. She's been one of the top players all year, and as we mentioned on the show last couple of weeks, it's great to see the players who have been playing well their whole career and all season long to do it in the playoffs and do it in these big moments.
Absolutely. And then in Division I, Longmeadow gets another crack at its first state championship for field hockey and plays the Walpole, which is the best nickname in Western Mass, right? What is it, Tom?
Porkers,
only for that program, though.
Only for the field hockey team, and they fought for that. They wanted to be the Porkers. The rest of the teams are the Rebels, I think.
I feel like that's a now the rest of the story segment we'll have to do at some point about how that all happened. But a team that fell short at 1-0. But I mean, man, that field hockey program, and they're young.
And it was a wild finish too.
Right.
They hit the post on a shot with 4 seconds left. With about 10 minutes left, our reporter Annie Maroon thought there was a goal scored by Longmeadow. I believe Jesse Moriarty had a shot on net, and the goalie's foot. What it looked like was the ball had crossed the goal line, but the referee was not in position to make it. I mean, I know a few other people that were at that game that thought it was a goal. They were celebrating it almost like it was a goal, but it was called off. So wild finish. They had, I think, 2 or 3 chances in the last 25 seconds. Just another well-played game.
And another special season for Longmeadow field hockey. Ann Simons gets her 400th career win this season. Program gets to another state final and gets that close. And they're pretty young. That's a team that it's not like this is the end of this amazing run they've had. This is the kind of continuation of what the program has done so
Jessie
far.
Moriarty, she scored, she's a leading goal scorer. She's only a junior. A lot of young players on that defense, that sophomores and juniors that will, Mary O'Reilly, another strong goal scorer that will be returning. So look for more of them in the future.
So let's take a quick peek into some winter sports things now as we're about to wrap things up. We've kind of starting to turn the page minus football, and man, basketball season is coming up, hockey season is coming up. We have a lot of interesting storylines. The biggest being the city boys basketball. Tom, you've already kind of started to work on this with Terrence Payne, who you two will be covering boys basketball for MassLive, MassLive.com. Ding. I mean, that really is kind of the thing that is propelling kind of the excitement throughout, I think, the winter season for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think this boys basketball season is going to be a real treat for basketball fans around the region, especially when you look at that Valley League. It's going to be just every night. It's going to be just a tough game. We got Putnam, the defending state champion. You got Central, who won the year before, and they're returning Chris Baldwin, who's one of the best players in the area.
And Jack O'Brien taking over as coach.
Right, exactly.
It's unbelievable.
He's a 6-time state champion at Charlestown, and then you add in Holyoke, who has probably the best big man in the region with Justin White. Cathedral is always a tough team, and they're strong again this year. and they have a tough schedule in the non-conference. So it's going to be interesting, especially when you look at the Valley Wheel. But then you also Valley League, excuse me, and then you also have some Valley Wheel teams, West Side and Northampton, that are going to make some noise.
Girls basketball wise, we have a Northampton team that came up short last year that brings almost everyone back, and has a couple of special players that we're looking forward to seeing. And the realignment over in general terms, to go from 3 divisions to 4, and the way that they've been spread out, it's going to be interesting to see. We were talking, Tom, about how there's so few teams in Division 2. You might have a pretty small bracket, and so it'll be kind of a little interesting to see how that plays out. And finally, I just want to highlight hockey real quick because Cathedral was a young team last year, and they have a lot of guys back, and that's a team that made the Super 8 that, we really are kind of excited to see how that plays out too. But we have a whole winter season to kind of continue to cover those guys, and we will do that beginning next week, along with some more football coverage. That is all the time we have for this morning on High School Sports Saturday on Sports Radio 105.5 WEEI. Let's throw out some plugs. MassLive on Twitter, at MassLiveHS. Tom King is at by Thomas King. Jack Flagler is at J Flagler. I'm Jim Pignatiello at J Pignatiello. Big thanks to everyone at WEEI Springfield for all the help with the show. And thank you for listening. We really hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.